I first heard the story in the hangar dust, years after the shooting stopped. It was a legend whispered among the maintenance crews. This story begins long before the war, on August 1, 1941, in Bethpage, Long Island, New York. We watched as Chief Engineer Robert Hall sat in the pilot's seat. The prototype lumbered down the runway. Its barrel-shaped fuselage seemed impossibly heavy. The ex-TBF-1 prototype rotated skyward. You could feel the critics back in the Navy shaking their heads. It was the biggest single-engine aircraft they had ever seen. Too complicated, too heavy, too ambitious. None of them could have known this ungainly bird, dismissed as an engineering disaster, would sink more enemy warships than any other American aircraft in history. The mathematics of naval warfare were about to be rewritten. The journey to this moment began in March 1939. The United States Navy issued a requirement that challenged every manufacturer. The Douglas TBD Devastator, introduced in 1937, was already obsolete. The Navy needed a replacement, and they needed it fast. The requirements seemed impossible. A top speed of 300 miles per hour, a range of 1,000 miles, a crew of 3. All ordnance was to be carried internally in a bomb bay. You needed armor protection and self-sealing fuel tanks. Most ambitiously, an electrically powered dorsal turret. That feature had defeated every previous attempt. 13 companies submitted proposals. The competition quickly narrowed to 2 finalists. Vought Aviation offered the XTBU-1, a sleek, elegant design. Grumman Aircraft Corporation submitted the XTBF-1. It looked like they had inflated their successful F-4F Wildcat fighter to grotesque proportions. The Vought design was prettier. The Grumman design was complicated. Vought got the initial contract, but Vought was already drowning in orders for their F-4U Corsair fighter. They could not possibly deliver the torpedo bombers in time. The contract was transferred to Grumman. Leroy Grumman's team found themselves with an impossible deadline. Engineer Robert Hall stared at the mountain of requirements. Everything the Navy wanted added weight, complexity, and unproven systems. The internal bomb bay alone was a nightmare. It needed to hold either a 22.4-inch Mark 13 torpedo weighing 2,000 pounds or 4 500-pound bombs or depth charges or mines. The bay doors had to operate reliably under fire.
The powered turret presented even greater challenges. Grumman chose an electrical system, betting the entire design on unproven technology. If the electrical system failed, the rear gunner would be helpless. The wing folding mechanism added another layer of complexity. To fit on carriers, the wings needed to fold. The Avenger's wings were the largest span of any Navy aircraft, 54 feet fully extended. Leroy Grumman himself solved this problem during a design meeting. Using a pink eraser and paper clips, he discovered the Stow Wing mechanism. This mechanism allowed the massive wings to fold back and upwards simultaneously. It reduced the wingspan to just 18 feet. The Wright 2600-8 engine, a twin-row 14-cylinder radio producing 1,700 horsepower, struggled to lift the applicant-loaded aircraft. Empty weight was 10,080 pounds. Combat-loaded weight was 15,905 pounds. This made the TBF the heaviest single-engine aircraft in the world. Critics within the Navy called it the pregnant beast. Others called it the turkey. The names were not compliments. On December 30th, 1940, the Navy placed an order for 286 TBF-1 aircraft. That was more than 7 months before the prototype had even flown. War was coming. The urgency was clear. The prototype's first flight on August 1st, 1941 revealed both promise and problems. The aircraft flew, but it flew like a truck, heavy and ponderous. The controls were mushy. Visibility was poor for the pilot. But it was stable. It could carry its full load. And those intricate internal systems, the ones critics said would fail, actually worked. Then came November 28, 1941. The first prototype caught fire during a test flight near Brentwood, New York. Test pilots Bob Hall and Gordon Israel successfully bailed out. Flames consumed the aircraft. The prototype crashed and was destroyed. Critics pounced. The design was too elaborate, too many failure points. The program should be canceled. Grumman's response was to accelerate. The second prototype was nearly ready. The first production TBF-1 was completed on January 3, 1942. That was less than 4 weeks after Pearl Harbor brought America into the war. By early June 1942, over 100 TBF Avengers had been delivered. 6 of these aircraft were assigned to Torpedo Squadron 8 for evaluation. Their devastators had already deployed aboard the carrier Hornet. The 6 Avengers arrived at Pearl Harbor just hours after the carriers departed. They were headed for a crucial battle near a tiny atoll called Midway. Volunteers were called for. 6 crews raised their hands. Many had never flown out of sight of land. All 6 aircraft made it to Midway Island. June 4, 1942. 0710 hours. 6 brand new TBF Avengers took off from Midway Island's Henderson Field. They were part of the first wave of attacks against the Japanese carrier fleet. The aircraft had been in service for exactly 5 months. They were flying into the teeth of the most experienced carrier force in the world. The Japanese combat air police fell upon them like wolves. Mitsubishi A6M0 fighters, flown by veterans, tore into the lumbering Avengers. The TBF's defensive armament proved inadequate. The Avengers were slow. At maximum attack speed, they barely managed 130 miles per hour. The Zeros could exceed 300. One by one, the Avengers fell.
Ensign Albert Kyle Ernest aircraft took hit after hit. 20-millimeter cannon shells punched through the wings and fuselage. His turret gunner, aviation machinist mate 3rd Class J. Darrell Manning, was killed instantly. His radioman, aviation radioman 3rd Class Harry Fryer, just 17 years old, was wounded in the head and wrist. Hydraulics failed. The electrical system sparked and smoked. Blood from the wounded radioman sprayed across the cockpit. But the TBF kept flying. The massive radial engine, despite multiple hits, continued to produce power. The self-sealing fuel tanks prevented the aircraft from exploding. The armor plating, the extra weight critics questioned, saved Ernest's life. 5 of the 6 Avengers were shot down. Only Ernest's battered aircraft made it back to Midway. He crash-landed with 1 crew member dead and 2 wounded. Both Ernest and Fryer survived their injuries. The young radioman would later recall that moment. The aircraft barely responding to controls, but still flying. Engineers later examined the surviving aircraft. It had been struck by at least 9 20-millimeter cannon shells and 64 7.7-millimeter machine gun bullets. Nearly every major system was damaged. The Battle of Midway was a great American victory. The Japanese lost 4 fleet carriers. The torpedo bombers suffered catastrophic losses. Torpedo Squadron 8's sacrifice became legendary. The 15 devastators from Hornet were all lost. 29 men were killed. Only Ensign George Gay survived. The 6 Avengers from Midway lost 5 aircraft and 9 men killed, 83% casualties. Critics renewed their calls to cancel the program. The aircraft was too vulnerable, too elaborate. But intelligence officers reached a different conclusion. Ernest's TBF had absorbed enough damage to destroy 10 normal aircraft, yet it flew home with 2 survivors. The electrical turret had continued to function. The folding wing mechanism had not failed. The engine had run for 2 hours after multiple strikes. The aircraft was not too elaborate, it was too tough. Every intricate system, every redundancy had been designed for exactly this. The over-engineered Avenger brought its crew home. Production accelerated. By August 1942, dozens of Avengers reached the fleet. Torpedo Squadron 8 reformed. Ensign Ernest rejoined and fought at Guadalcanal, earning his second Navy Cross. The Battle of the Eastern Solomons on August 24, 1942, provided the first real test of tactics. 28 Avengers from the carriers Saratoga and Enterprise attacked the Japanese fleet. They sank the light carrier Ryujo. 7 Avengers were lost, but crucial lessons were learned. The aircraft could absorb tremendous damage. November 1942 brought the naval Battle of Guadalcanal. Marine Corps and Navy Avengers played the key role in sinking the battleship Hiei. The Avengers put torpedoes into the drifting 37,000-ton giant. The complicated aircraft proved it could kill capital ships. But the most remarkable transformation was happening in the Atlantic Ocean. German U-boats were winning the tonnage war. The Avenger, with its large bomb bay and long range, was perfect for anti-submarine warfare. The TBF-1D variant, equipped with ASB surface search radar, could detect surfaced U-boats at night. The large bomb bay could carry depth charges, and the top-secret Mark 24 Fido torpedo. From May 1943 to May 1945, Avengers flying from escort carriers sank or assisted in sinking 35 U-boats in the Atlantic. British Avengers, the Tarpon, and later Avenger, added to the tally. The intricate radar, the large bay, the long endurance, it created the most effective submarine killer of the war.
The year 1944 brought the Avenger to its peak. Nearly 10,000 had been built. General Motors' Eastern Aircraft Division took over most production, churning out 7,546 TBMs. Grumman built 2,290 TBFs. Leroy Grumman doubted GM could build even one. GM produced more than 3 times as many. The TBM-3 variant, with a more powerful 1,900 horsepower R2620 engine, reached squadrons in mid-1944. The Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944 was called the Great Marianas Turkey Shoot. Afterward, Admiral Mark Mitscher learned the Japanese fleet was retreating at extreme range. Over 200 Avengers participated in the mission Beyond Darkness. They launched late in the afternoon, knowing many would return in darkness. Avengers from the carrier Bellawood sank the light carrier Hio. 247 Japanese sailors died. Many Avengers ran out of fuel, ditching in the ocean. Mitscher ordered every ship in the fleet to turn on lights. 80 pilots and crew were lost. But the mission proved the Avenger could operate in conditions that would ground other bombers. October 1944 brought the Battle of Leyte Gulf, the largest naval battle in history. Approximately 400 Avengers participated. The engagement at Samar became one of the most dramatic confrontations. 6 escort carriers faced 4 Japanese battleships. Admiral Takeo Kurita's center force appeared at dawn on October 25th. They were catastrophically outnumbered. Lieutenant Commander Edward Huxtable directed his Avengers in continuous attacks. They had no armor-piercing bombs, many had no torpedoes. They attacked anyway, making repeated runs. Some pilots made dry runs with no weapons, trying to distract Japanese gunners. The carrier Gambier Bay was hit and sank, taking over 100 men. But the ferocity of the American defense convinced Kurita he faced fleet carriers. Kurita withdrew through San Bernardino Strait. The Avengers of Taffy 3 helped turn away Japan's most powerful surface fleet.
They did it without the weapons or training for such a mission. On October 24, 1944, waves of American aircraft attacked the super-battleship Musashi. This largest battleship ever built, over 72,000 tons, was declared unsinkable. 259 aircraft launched in 6 waves. Avengers scored torpedo hits from multiple directions. Estimates range from 10 to 19 torpedoes striking home. Just after 7:30 in the evening, the Musashi capsized and sank. 1,023 of her crew were lost. 5 months later, on April 7, 1945, the Musashi's sister ship Yamato made her final sortie. Operation Ten-Go was a suicide mission to Okinawa. Admiral Mitscher launched 386 aircraft, including nearly 150 Avengers. The attack began at 12:37 in the afternoon. The first wave overwhelmed the Yamato's defenses. The torpedo impacts continued. The massive armor could not stop torpedoes hitting below the waterline. At 2:23 in the afternoon, the Yamato exploded in a mushroom cloud. Casualties were between 2,500 and 3,100 crew members. The era of the battleship died with her. The Avengers had killed both Yamato-class super-battleships. The aircraft also sank or helped sink 12 carriers, 4 additional battleships, 19 cruisers, 25 destroyers, and approximately 30 submarines. The total tonnage exceeded 1 million tons of enemy shipping. No other aircraft type came close. But the vast majority of Avenger missions were not dramatic torpedo attacks. The Avenger increasingly shifted to conventional bombing and rocket attacks. The large internal bay could carry 2,000 pounds of bombs or rockets. Avenger supported amphibious landings across the Pacific. The aircraft's versatility extended beyond combat. The roomy interior could carry cargo and personnel. Avengers served as air ambulances, evacuating wounded. They flew reconnaissance missions. The sophisticated design that seemed like a liability in 1941 proved to be the aircraft's greatest strength by 1945. One Avenger pilot who experienced the aircraft's toughness firsthand was Ensign George Herbert Walker Bush. Born June 12, 1924, Bush enlisted in the Navy on his 18th birthday, June 12, 1942. He became the youngest commissioned naval aviator. At age 18, on June 9, 1943, Bush was assigned to Torpedo Squadron 51 on the carrier San Jacinto. He flew 58 combat missions. On September 2, 1944, 19-year-old Bush was flying his TBM Avenger named Barbara over Chichijima. His crew was Lieutenant Junior Grade William White and Radio Man Second Class John Delaney. Bush's aircraft was hit by anti-aircraft fire over the target. The engine caught fire. Smoke filled the cockpit. Despite the fire, Bush pressed the attack and completed his bomb run. As flames spread, he gave the order to bail out. He headed the burning aircraft out to sea to give his crew the best chance of rescue. Bush bailed out at approximately 2,000 feet. He hit his head on the tail stabilizer. He landed in the ocean bleeding. He saw no sign of White or Delaney. Neither survived. Bush paddled desperately for 4 hours. Japanese boats searched for him. The submarine, USS Finback, surfaced nearby. Crewmen pulled the exhausted pilot aboard. Bush was the only survivor from his aircraft. For completing his bomb run while on fire, Bush was awarded the Distinguished Flying Cross. He would return stateside, eventually becoming the 41st President of the United States. Bush flew 58 combat missions in Avengers. He logged 1,228 flight hours and made 128 carrier landings. He experienced what thousands learned. The aircraft was unforgiving of mistakes. But when battle damage came, when enemy fire struck, the sophisticated design kept you alive. The statistics tell the story the critics refused to see. Nearly 10,000 Avengers delivered. Over 46,000 combat sorties flown. Total combat losses were 729 aircraft.
The loss rate, 1.58% per sortie, was among the lowest of any combat aircraft in the war. Anti-aircraft fire accounted for 422 losses. Aerial combat accounted for just 47 losses. Operational accidents accounted for 260. The elaborate systems that were supposed to fail rarely did. The aircraft that was too heavy to fight proved too tough to kill. The Devastator was slaughtered at Midway. Torpedo Squadron 8, flying them, lost all 15 aircraft and 29 crew members. The Avenger, flying the same mission the same day, brought one aircraft home with 2 survivors. That battered TBF proved what would become the norm: survivability through robust engineering. The Stow Wing folding mechanism that added weight and parts allowed the large aircraft to fit on small escort carriers. Leroy Grumman had conceived the design using a pink eraser and paper clips. It reduced the 54-foot 2-inch wingspan to approximately 18 feet when folded. This ingenious design multiplied the number of ships that could operate Avengers.
The Avenger's service did not end in 1945. Post-war variants continued flying with the U.S. Navy until 1954. The Royal Canadian Navy operated them until 1960 for anti-submarine warfare. France operated Avengers in Indochina. Japan's Maritime Self-Defense Force used them into the early 1960s. The elaborate aircraft that was supposedly difficult to maintain proved remarkably easy to keep flying. The TBM 3W variant pioneered airborne early warning, carrying the massive AN/APS-20 radar. The aircraft's final combat use came in 1951, during the Korean War. The distinction of the last aerial torpedo attack belonged to the Douglas A.D. Skyraider, the Avenger's successor. On May 1, 1951, 8 AD-4 Skyraiders struck the Hwachon Dam in North Korea. They carried Mark 13 torpedoes. The era of the torpedo bomber ended where it had reached its peak. The engineers at Grumman had not just built an elaborate torpedo bomber, they had built the future of naval aviation. They had proven that survivability could be engineered into an aircraft through redundancy. The Avenger was not elaborate for the sake of complexity. It was sophisticated because war is unpredictable. The aircraft rewrote the rules of naval warfare. It sank more enemy ships than any other American aircraft in history. The aircraft kept its promise. It brought them home.